Hello again.
Hello again.
We're in the middle of October, and joining me once again is...
I'm Marlin Crawford.
aka Guy. So far this month, we've looked at a classic from the Universal Monster era, an independent 70s fantasy horror film. Now, let's get into another fantasy horror classic, this time from the 80s, and also one of the films that redefined the slasher horror genre. From the late, great horror master himself, Wes Craven, 1984's A Nightmare on Elm Street. A Nightmare on Elm Street has become one of the most iconic horror films of the past 30 and approaching 40 years now. It came out a few years after Halloween and Friday the 13th and presented an all-new type of slasher villain, as opposed to the silent mass killer with a knife or a machete. We got Freddy Krueger, the killer whose disfigured face was on full display, whose weapon of choice was a glove with knives for fingernails. And this is what really separated him from the other slasher killers of the 80s, Freddy Krueger talks.
Please, God.
This is God.
And as the films went on, he developed a pretty wisecracking sense of humor.
This is it, Jennifer. Your big breaking TV. From the prime time, bitch.
What did you think of Nightmare on Elm Street, having seen it for the very first time?
Well, you'd heard about it quite a bit. Saw the trailer for it. Over time, you see bits of it on television, and it's better than some of the earlier slasher movies. They actually tried to do some acting in this with a certain amount of success, and but it had some holes. And it had some very graphic effects.
Indeed. Over 500 gallons of blood, fake blood, were used. Fake. And I don't know if you can tell, Guy's not the biggest horror movie fan. I, on the other hand, love them, so really going on the family angle here to look past some parts. But he does like a few horror films. I showed you Halloween about a year or two ago, and you actually thought that was pretty well made.
Yeah, it was interesting. They did a good job, and these particular horror movies have got some production quality to them. They weren't, the really like C- movies that were put out first and all that sort of thing. So that part of it is good and it's interesting. And obviously, by the time this was made and Wes Craven wrote it, there was more personal development and everything else. Not that there weren't a few holes in the storyline, but...
We'll get to that as we go on, but yeah, Nightmare on Elm Street, it had a slightly bigger budget than certain horror films at the time. Like Halloween, Friday the 13th were made for under $1 million each. This one had about a $1.8 million budget, most of which went into the special effects for the film. I don't know if you noticed, but at the beginning it says New Line Cinema presents. Company that's known for a shit ton of movies today, the Lord of the Rings movies, Rush Hour, and a few other 80s horror classics like Critters. And this was pretty much one of New Line's very early films. Like, it wasn't the first film it did, but it was the first really successful movie it ever did. In fact, A Nightmare on Elm Street saved New Line Cinema from bankruptcy, nicknaming it the house that Freddy built.
That's good.
Yeah. The main story focuses on a group of kids who live on Elm Street, obviously, despite the fact that Elm Street, those words are actually never said once in this film. And these group of kids include Nancy Thompson, played by Heather Langenkamp, in her most famous and personal favorite role.
And yes, she was the core of the movie.
Yeah. She carried the whole film, and like she's the heroine, but she's not 100%. There are a few annoying moments, but she feels real in certain areas. She's a very interesting character.
Glenn, not now. We're here for Tina now, not ourselves.
Why is she so bothered by a stupid nightmare anyway?
Because he was scary, that's why.
Her character, as it was first evolved, she was not interesting to me. It was just like, oh, this is going to be not good. But as the movie developed, and it got into the more serious stuff where there was real danger, and she had to develop a backbone and all that other kind of thing, she did carry that off. She did carry that off.
Yeah.
Basically, I thought the actress that acted Tina acted a better Tina than this actress did in Nancy. That was my. And Tina was certainly not on the air. I mean, on screen nearly as much.
You okay, Tina? Just a dream, Mom. Some dream judging from that.
Amanda Wes, I think that's how you pronounce her name. She plays Nancy's friend Tina, who is actually the first character we see in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And the way it opens, you could kind of be led to believe that she's going to be the main character.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess that could be a misdirection thing of making you think they're going to be the character, and then boom.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get the girls' boyfriends. Tina's boyfriend, Rod, played by, and in the film he's billed as Nick Corey, but I read the guy's actual name is Jesus Garcia.
Jesus, okay. Yeah.
Sorry if I mispronounced, but I guess he thought more American sounding might get me more jobs.
Charlie Sheen.
And at first he seemed a little annoying, and the character is annoying, but he did a good job playing kind of a tough asshole, I think.
Yeah, he was supposed to be an annoying character, and he was.
It's my name, bringing that down just 3 yards from the goal line. What a brilliant tackle.
Oh, what's that?
Intense, huh? So what's going on here? An orgy or something?
And then there's Nancy's boyfriend, who is not a one-note character. He does appear throughout the film.
Mm-hmm.
Glenn, played by Johnny Depp.
Yeah, out here at Barry's. Huh? Yeah, noisy as usual. Just some kids drag racing outside, I think, Mom. Listen, Mom, I gotta go. I think there's been an accident out there.
This was Johnny Depp's very first acting job. He had never acted in a movie or a TV show before. Apparently he just went to give support to a friend who was auditioning, Jackie Earle Haley, who many years later would actually play Freddy Krueger in the 2010 remake.
And what was another role he played?
He was the short kid in Breaking Away, who didn't like being called short.
So we'll just do it here.
Don't forget to punch the clock, Shorty.
Johnny says apparently he got the part because he was reading with Wes Craven's daughter for the role.
Mm-hmm.
He needs someone to read across.
Right.
And apparently Wes's daughter told her dad she thought he was dreamy. So he thought, good choice for a character in a teen movie.
Yeah, teen says this is dreamy. We'll go with it.
Early in the film, Tina and Nancy talk about a nightmare they both had that both featured the same mysterious figure.
Oh, he scraped his fingernail on one of these. Actually, they were more like finger knives or something. Something made a horrible sound. Nancy, you dreamed about the same creep I did.
And she asks that Nancy stay over, and she brings over her boyfriend Glenn. Then Rod shows up, and he and Tina just goes 80s movie, teenagers, get down to fucking.
Morality sucks.
And then they fall asleep, and the nightmare sequences in these movies, particularly the first film, very well done. They're very elaborate. They are chilling, suspenseful, and showcase, once again, some pretty impressive special effects.
I don't know if they were groundbreaking, but I would think that they were groundbreaking for the time. The detail and the variety of things that they did was very impressive. And you said earlier you think that a great deal of the production money was spent on that,
Yeah.
and it showed.
We then get the first death of the movie, where Tina is being killed in her dream, and we see Rod watching her. Just, it's interesting, like, she's getting killed in the dream, and whatever happens to these kids in their dreams will affect them in the real world. So, like, Freddy's like wrestling, throwing her around in the dream, and in the real world, it looks like she's flying all over the place.
It was an interesting change up, because earlier in the movie we saw both Tina and the Nancy character had seen Freddy. They knew what he looked like. So the guy gets involved, he doesn't see him. And I don't think Freddy revealed himself to any of the males in the movie. The closest it came was when, later in the movie, close to the very end, the father, the John Saxon character, comes in and throws a blanket over the burning bodies in the bed. He just comes in, throws it over. You know. And then, of course, when he pulled the blanket off, Freddy's not there, and just the... All right, go ahead. But yeah, that's something that was kind of, I'm not sure what I think about it, but did they do that on purpose, or it was that only the girls could see him? I'm not sure.
It may be, but if they did, that was only something they did for the first film. Because as the series goes on, both the men and the women can see him.
You've got the body. I've got the brain.
At first, everybody thinks Rod was the one who killed Tina, and he's freaking out, and Nancy doesn't know what to think.
There was somebody else there.
The door was locked from your side.
Don't look at me like I'm some fucking fruitcake or something. I'm warning you.
Just move away from us, son.
And soon, one by one, her other friends are getting killed off by Freddy. All she has is herself, and her parents do not believe her when she says she thinks it's the man in her dreams. And near the end of the film, Nancy's mother reveals just who Freddy Krueger is after a visit to a hospital to help with sleep-deprived people.
Okay, all set.
Miss Nancy. Okay. Let's do it.
That doctor is Charles Fleischer, who is best known as the voice of Roger Rabbit. Her mother reveals that many years ago there was a child killer named Freddy Krueger, and after he was let go due to a technicality, all the parents of his victims and in the neighborhood tracked him down and
Took gasoline. Poured it all around the place. And made a trail of it out the door. Then lit the whole thing up and watched it burn.
Nancy's mother shows that she has Freddy's glove that apparently he used to kill the kids. And it's implied that Nancy's father might have had a part in it. Just from that look that the two of them shared at earlier.
I don't know. I mean, it just leaves a big question. Did she and other parents take part in this and didn't tell him, or he found out later? Because he's a cop, you know. It's all up for question. And even if he knew but covered it up, something like that would get out.
So it's shown in the latter sequels that there's actually a big conspiracy going on. And all the parents are working together to make sure their kids don't know about Freddy Krueger. So maybe something like that was going on in the first film.
Yeah.
And apparently, originally it was going to be revealed that Nancy and her friends all had siblings who were older than them, and they were like too young to remember them, and that they had all been victims of Freddy.
Yeah, that would have been consistent with the child killer and why all the parents banded together and hunted the guy down.
Yeah,
That would.
and could explain why he's going after these kids specifically. In the original script, Freddy was originally going to be a child molester, but there was a lot of cases of that going on at the time, and Wes Craven or somebody didn't want to be accused of exploiting real life stuff, so they changed it to being a child killer.
Which I guess is
Just as dark.
a little, just that much better than being a child molester.
Maybe. They did end up using that for the remake, though, because different times.
Yeah.
This is for my son! Hi, Chris. You look just as beautiful as ever.
One thing I found throughout, and this was part of it, I think it must have appealed to teens, because nobody believed that this was happening.
And a red and green sweater, really dirty. And he uses these knives, like giant fingernails.
Nobody took Nancy or the other people seriously. I mean, there were some gaps in information, you couldn't explain some things, but you know, people are dying. This person's, dying in ways that, you know, made the coroner go throw up and so on and so forth.
What the hell did that? I don't know. What's the coroner got to say? He had jello puking since he saw it.
But every time Nancy would scream, people would finally come in. And she's, I'm okay. Oh, sure, okay. Just leave her.
I'm okay. I'm fine. Yeah, I'll go straight home.
Every time, even at the very end when the father saw his wife's body melt into what used to be a bed sheet and disappear, she says, I'm good. I'll just be here for a few minutes. Oh, okay. And boom, out the door, and the door shuts.
I'm okay. You go downstairs. I'll be there in a minute.
I mean, it's just, give me a break.
past couple of years, I've been watching people on YouTube do review shows, where they give their thoughts as well as do a lot of comedy. People like the Nostalgia Critic, the Cinema Snob, the Blockbuster Buster, and so many fucking others. And like all these other movie reviewers, I've given myself a review nickname. It's something that I think will grab people's attention. Will let you know immediately that I'm a movie guy. And it's a name I'm sure that no one else has thought of using. The Unusual Suspect. I don't want to sound too full of myself, but it just feels so great when you come up with something so original.
Babe, I think that there's something you should see.
I grab the guy in my dream. You see me struggling, so you wake me up. We both come out, you whack the fucker, and we got him.
Are you crazy? Hit him with what?
You're the jock. You're the baseball bat or something. Whatever you do, don't fall asleep.
Sounds like Johnny's thinking to fall asleep.
After failing to stay awake to help Nancy in her plan, Glenn falls victim to Freddy, leading to the most famous death scene in the movie. The blood geyser.
I think that's when they had to have used the revolving room for that one too.
Yes, they used a revolving room for Tina's death scene, so when she's going all up the walls, and it was the same set, and well, you can kind of tell it had to have been upside down.
Because the water gushed up just as though it were falling down. In every way.
It still looks cool.
Yeah, it does. It does.
Just going up and up. It's like a never ending.
I mean, in a very nasty way, but cool. Yeah.
I know it happened.
I haven't been upstairs yet.
Yeah, but you know he's dead, right? Fred Krueger did it, Daddy. And only I can get him. It's my nightmare he comes to. Just come here and break the door down in exactly 20 minutes.
And then, and it was kind of a trademark of Wes Craven for not all, but some of his films, where the main character or characters set up a series of booby traps to capture the villain. It was done in Last House on the Left, The Hills Have Eyes. That was a cool sequence, seeing her build all those traps.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
All right. Even better than Home Alone.
She goes into the dream world once again and faces off against Freddy. And then manages to bring him into the real world.
I'm crazy after all.
Or not. Where he really gets the hell beat out of him. This also is another thing that a lot of people talk about, is how in the dream world, Freddy has the unlimited power to fuck with these kids. But you bring him into the real world, and the kids have a slightly upper hand against him.
He's badly burned. He's been damaged by the fire in the past, and so his human body, in the real human world, I'll buy into that. Okay, that's fine.
Forgive him. He's old.
Hey.
But yeah, we get to the part that you kept bringing up before I got a chance to probably introduce it. Mm-hmm. She gets her father to come into her mother's room where he does see Freddy and her mother burning, and he tries to put him out. Freddy disappears, and we get this very creepy image of her mother's skeleton disappearing into the bed. And she tells her father, as you said, just to go. And
I'm okay now.
It's the following thing with her and Freddy that could possibly, but this is and I'll be clear, I fucking love A Nightmare on Elm Street, but I do have a few questions and I don't want to say issues, but a few thoughts about the ending. After her father leaves, Freddy appears, and Nancy then says, "It's all a dream."
It's too late, Kruger. This is just a dream. You're not alive. This whole thing is just a dream.
And she doesn't say it, but it has a real "I'm not afraid of you, so you can't have the power anymore" vibe to it.
You're nothing. You're shit.
I guess the one thing where Nancy gets a backbone and says, you can't, essentially you can't harm me anymore. I'm just not gonna believe it. And the effect goes where he disappears. But it doesn't still solve the problem, is that eventually she's going to start going to sleep again.
This leads to an interesting question. Was the whole film just a dream? And it almost feels like it's gonna go that route.
It's bright. It's gonna burn off sooner. It wouldn't be so bright. Feeling better? Oh, I feel like $1,000,000.
Until she meets with her friends who appear to be alive, and all of a sudden they end up getting trapped in their car.
Sucked through the window in the front house doorway. Brings her through. It's like a cat going through the...
It's a little silly and funny looking, but I thought that was a good final moment for the film. The ending's a little confusing, but...
I think that Wes Craven decided in his writing to leave unanswered questions. A lot of poets, when they write poems,
I get you. They're saying it's...
Just do that. Let it hang out there, and let the person enjoying the poem, enjoying the movie, do what we're doing now.
I'm not saying it's an ending that leaves me disappointed. I'm just saying it's a little confusing, but it's that final moment where everything just goes to shit when you thought it was going to be nice. That kind of fixes it a little bit. And believe it or not, Wes Craven actually wanted A Nightmare on Elm Street to end on a happy note. He wanted Nancy's friends being alive, her mother getting better.
No, baby, I'm gonna stop drinking. I just don't feel like it anymore.
Before it goes to hell, it had kind of a fake happy vibe to it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know, maybe if he made it feel more genuine, it could have worked, but It would have felt a little bit of a cop out if that's how it ended.
Yeah, because you're, you know, it was kind of, it was kind of wanting you to feel that way. Oh God, it's over. It's, I do think John Saxon's character was underused.
He's a good actor, but
he's a good actor, but the character wasn't useful enough. Could have been done more, but it was okay. I mean, he did everything he could with the character. It just wasn't much of it was written.
Look, honey, you just do that. Get yourself some sleep. That's what I've been telling you all along.
But she'll be here to catch him?
Lieutenant, they're waiting for you upstairs.
Yeah, sure. I'll be there, sweetheart. Now, look, you just get yourself some rest, please. Deal?
What did you think about the other cop there at the end, who just decided on his own volition he was going to be an asshole?
Everything's gonna be all right. Everything's under control.
Just like that, you asshole! Daddy, help me! Please!
Maybe I better go tell the lieutenant.
Yeah,
I thought he was a retard.
yeah.
I think the underrated performance of the film is Ronnie Blackley as Marge Thompson, Nancy's mom. She felt pretty genuine in her brokenness.
Yes, I will agree. However, I felt that the script written for her on the thing, all of a sudden she's got Freddy Krueger's hat.
Is she breathing? I brought something out from my tree.
And then she's not pouring
She's drinking
vodka in a glass.
Right from the bottle.
Straight down, big time. I can't get enough of this stuff. So yeah, she was damaged. She was messed up, and she was not acting rationally as far as based on the information that she had.
I thought the character, while not likable in any way, was pretty good. Like I thought she did a good job with the character, and
There's something wrong with you. You're imagining things. You'll feel better when you sleep. It's just as simple as that. Scream,
The thing is that her mother could have still been the damaged person in all of that sort of thing, but not the person who saw the hat. Somebody else that took her to the hospital could have been, so the mother wasn't faced with the reality of Freddy Krueger's name in the hat.
Feel it. Give me that damn thing. It even has his name written in it. Fred Krueger, Mom. Fred Krueger.
And that would have made her a damaged person, but not irrational.
stupid. Not stupid.
Yeah.
Well, she is a drunk, so what can you do? And the last things I just want to mention that should probably stay in the spoiler area are my favorite of the nightmare sequences in the film, even though it's brief, is the bathtub sequence. I find that to be the scariest scenario, being pulled under the water, and
All of a sudden you're there, you're completely helpless, you're in a tub by yourself, but you're not.
yeah.
That's frightening. And it's the claw that the knife fingers that are coming out of the water. The watcher sees it the first time, but not Nancy.
The scene was filmed inside like an actual swimming pool. They built the bathroom set over a pool.
Well, that makes the most
And
sense.
the scene at the end where Freddy is set on fire in the basement, runs up the stairs, falls down, then starts up again. The stuntman for that scene, Anthony Sakuri, won Best Stunt of the Year for that scene. It was apparently at the time the most elaborate fire stunt ever done for a film.
So that was one shot. That wasn't
Yeah, they did I believe they did the whole thing one shot. If not, then
So he's on fire
yeah.
the whole time. Holy crap! Really?
Yeah.
I wouldn't have. I'm surprised to hear that. Yes.
Badass motherfucker.
Or maybe just a little nuts.
The origin for Nightmare on Elm Street came to Wes Craven after reading some articles in the LA Times about Southeast Asian refugees who died in throes of horrific nightmares. They had come to the US to escape the murderous reign of Pol Pot.
Pol Pot, Cambodian, yes.
And there was no real explanation given for why they died in their sleeps. Apparently there was no heart conditions or issues.
Mm-hmm.
They just died having nightmares.
Hmm.
And Wes Craven just looked at it and thought, this could be a good story for a horror film. The character of Freddy Krueger had many inspirations. The name Freddy Krueger was apparently the name of a kid who bullied Wes Craven in his childhood. Wonder how he thought if he ever saw the movie. The appearance of Freddy came from a hobo. Like, Wes was at his window, he looked down and he saw this hobo just staring at him, and he said it just scared the shit out of him. And that opening sequence where you see Freddy's hands building the glove, they were actually the hands of special effects man Charles Bellardinelli, as he was the only person who knew how to build the glove from scratch. In fact, the first time Robert Englund tried on the glove, he cut himself. Which brings me to another cast question. How do you think Robert Englund did as Freddy Krueger?
I think he was as frightening a character as the script wanted him to be. Definitely, I think he was frightening, and he wasn't just frightening to look at. He carried him and conducted himself in a very threatening way.
You think you was gonna get away from me?
I know you too well now, Freddy.
You die.
Oh, and if anyone's wondering where the glove came from, Wes just said he did research. People apparently found like knives really threatening, and he also one day he noticed his cat unsheath its claws,
Mm-hmm.
and it just
Yeah.
clicked for him.
Yeah, we can do that. And Freddy Krueger had 4 knives. Johnny Depp and Edward Scissorhands had many more blades. But he wasn't the same kind of character, was he?
And before we wrap this up, I just want to give a quick shout out to the music of this film done by Charles Bernstein, who had also done the scoring for 80s horror films like The Entity and Cujo. And of course, there's that fun little song during the end credits. For some reason, these movies don't feel like continuing the score into the credits. They always end on some kind of rock or rap song. It was produced by Robert O'Shea, who remained a producer on every single Elm Street sequel. Great cinematography by Jock Haitkin, who I read actually did his cinematography while wearing an eye patch, so he wouldn't be distracted by anything going on. And good editing by Rick Shane and Patrick McMahon. Good crew. The crew are the most underrated part of a movie, and I think everybody did a good job here. And very last things I will say before we give our final rating to this film. Wes Craven had done some pickup work on Friday the 13th a few years earlier, and the film's director, Sean S. Cunningham, helped out a little on this film. The two are actually pretty good friends, well they were, and Sean produced Last House on the Left. And another director that Wes might be friends with, I haven't read beyond this funny little feud they had, Sam Raimi, the director of The Evil Dead. After seeing a ripped poster for Jaws in The Hills Have Eyes, he then had a ripped poster of The Hills Have Eyes in the first Evil Dead movie. And then Wes featured Nancy trying to stay awake and failing by watching The Evil Dead. And Freddy's glove appears in Evil Dead 2. Apparently someone stole it.
My.
And Amanda Wyss, who played Tina, pretty good but very brief character. She was handing out candy on Halloween the year following the filming of this movie, and she saw a lot of kids dressed as Freddy. So she told them I was Tina, and they didn't believe her. Yeah, Nightmare on Elm Street, a very impressive, well done fantasy horror film showcasing very well done special effects. Pretty solid writing and directing. Ending's a little questionable, but it works in terms of opening the door for more movies. Any final words?
I'm still not a horror fan, but I enjoyed watching this movie and talking about it with you.
Good enough. Final rating for me would be 8.4 out of 10. What would you give it?
I'm not going to rate it. I'll just stand by what I said.
Thumbs up. Good enough. Well, this has been the 3rd October review. See you next week, this time with a film from the 90s. Hope you enjoyed this review.